This is the largest and most exciting lost place that I've ever explored. This post-apocalyptic place was a restricted area, and it's still full of traces of the National Socialists and the Soviets who both used it as a military base. I am going to show you an enormously vast totalitarian landscape that has over 50 different buildings, all lying in ruins. The place is historically too important to be destroyed, but too damaged to be renovated. So it has become a lost place. Entering here is still forbidden and dangerous, but it's fun. So, can you imagine for me to not go in there? Good. The city of Berlin lies just an hour away from this military base. Why is that important? Well, Berlin has been the capital of Germany long before the National Socialist era. So, being able to defend Berlin was one of the main reasons why, in the late 1930s, the Nazis relocated the cavalry school of Prussia from the town of Hanover in northern Germany to this place, and also because it provided more space. Space for not just anyone. Those soldiers who were doing service here were mainly high-ranking officers who lived here with their families. The complex provided space for as many as 11,000 individuals in total. You can still see the luxurious style of many representative buildings if you look at their elaborate ornaments both outside and inside. The officers' clubhouse is just one example. So, what on earth were the Nazis doing here besides feeling big and important? They used this site as an elite training school for cavalry. Yes, that means soldiers riding horses, and as a driving school for the German army's motorized troops, including tanks. During the last few months of the Second World War, Krampnitz was even used as the military base of the motorized troops to defend Berlin. Well, except that defending Berlin didn't go too well, did it? As you know, it all ended in a giant fucking disaster, and the Russians took over Berlin in just a bit more than 2 weeks. On April 26th of 1945, just 4 days before Adolf Hitler bites on a cyanide capsule and shoots himself in the head, the Nazis evacuated this base completely, just to be taken over by the Red Army the next day. And the Russians were not exactly lazy after arriving here. They expanded the site by adding apartment blocks and a series of administrative buildings. From the 1970s on, around 10,000 people lived here, of course mainly Russian troops with their wives and kids, and they had everything. They had their own farms and pigsties. Basically they were self-sufficient, so they had little contact to the outside world. You can still see the many remnants of vast apartment buildings, large garages, even hangars, gas stations, laundries. I saw a kindergarten. I saw 2 different gyms and a drinks warehouse. Hell, they even had a tennis court and a movie theater. So that is all well, except that, just like National Socialism, Soviet communism turned out to be another disastrous brain fart of the 20th century. And the whole fucking system just collapsed miserably in 1989, followed by the fall of the Berlin Wall and the reunification of the two Germanys and the end of the Cold War. It took the Russians just 3 more years until they abandoned the site in 1992. And this is when Krampnitz became the lost place that it is today. However, the Russians didn't just go without leaving a few presents for posterity. And I don't just mean the multitude of mysterious buildings that made me feel like a kid in a candy store. Some of these presents are actually no fun. As I said at the beginning, be careful if you come here. The dangers lurking in this place are manifold. For one, the remnants of a gigantic toxic spill were detected near the former laundry lying in the northwest of the site. Apparently, 500 liters of trichloromethane were spilled here in the late 1980s. Trichloromethane, what the motherfuck is that, you're asking, right? Well, trichloromethane is exactly what it sounds like. Used as a chemical detergent, it can give you cancer of the kidney and brain damage. So, just be careful where you dig, is all I'm saying. This whole place is actually quite frightening, to be honest. I was already startled by a pack of wild geese. They make a hell of a noise, believe it or not. And yeah, if you go into the buildings, what happens is that you hear cracking sounds all the time from I don't know where. You turn around and there is nobody, but then there is the sound of dripping water. And yeah, I'm beginning to understand more and more why so many directors choose the place to shoot movies at. I mean, just look at this, look at the portal. After the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Russians going bye-bye, the German military didn't have any interest or money to use the place, so it was left to rot and became a lost place. However, it did not take long until it was discovered by urban explorers and filmmakers. The site of Krampnitz has repeatedly been used as a shooting location for an incredible number of really successful blockbuster movies. You might have seen Inglourious Basterds by Quentin Tarantino. Another great movie, Enemy at the Gates, depicting the Battle of Stalingrad, starring Jude Law and Joseph Fiennes, was also shot here. Then George Clooney's The Monuments Man was also made here. Another film that was partly shot here is Valkyrie, starring Tom Cruise in the role of Colonel Stauffenberg, who plotted to assassinate Adolf Hitler on the 20th of July 1944, but failed and was executed the next day. Then you might remember Resident Evil, yes, one of the most groundbreaking computer games of all times that is often credited for defining the genre of survival horror / zombie hunt / total fucking bloodbath. Anyways, the game was adapted for the movie screen in 2002, starring Mila Jovovich, and was also shot in the officers' clubhouse that you see at the beginning of this video. You probably know, or at least have heard of the third part of the Hunger Games series, Mockingjay, that is starring awesome, funny and beautiful Jennifer Lawrence in the role of Katniss Everdeen. In one scene, after surviving a flamethrower attack, she and her companions flee into an abandoned cafe. That cafe is inside the burned out high-rise building that I stand on during the intro to this video, and that you're going to see in more detail towards the end of this video. Another thing that is special about this place is that you can see the architecture of both dictatorships that went down in Germany of the 20th century. This is of course the National Socialist era from the 30s, and right next to it you see all these socialist buildings that you can also check out. Okay, there's been a noise. I think that's somebody there. Let's go over here maybe. You can also see the socialist buildings, which is the other dictatorship that terrorized Eastern Europe and the whole world, to be honest. But what amazes me about the place the most is that it's just so enormously huge.
I always go like, there is an interesting building, let's check out that. But then it turns out there's another interesting building behind that, and another behind that. And I've seen maybe 1/4, 1/3 of the place, I'm just guessing. So it's incredibly huge. Just in case I can interest anyone in some Soviet totalitarian propaganda, Pravda is your best go. You might recognize this guy.
I've told you a lot about the history of this lost place, but what about its present and future? Krampnitz as a lost place will soon be gone, and with it will disappear the historic traces of various past regimes. The plans to refurbish and rebuild the area have existed since 2013. But often enough, lost places are lost places for a reason that goes far beyond human neglect and disinterest. It seems that nature has its magical ways to resist the plans of investors and builders to conquer it. In this case, the plans of refurbishment were delayed thanks to environmentalists and biologists who have pointed out a whole list of rare and strictly protected species of amphibians, birds, insects, reptiles, and an extremely rare species of bats that had all migrated into this military complex after it was abandoned by the Russians. As of May 2018, the plans envision rather a refurbishment than reconstruction of the buildings, most of which are legally protected as historical landmarks, fortunately. Nevertheless, reconstruction and refurbishment have begun. So here's the problem. The builders are in a hurry to start working since their time is running out because the roofs of the buildings are falling in one by themselves. If they leave for the buildings to further rot just 1 or 2 more years, the renovation will become too costly, which would make the whole project fail. The current plans of renovation include an 8 hectares large green area, and 20% of the site is supposed to become a commercial area to provide to the needs of its new inhabitants. Yes, the large majority of the buildings are planned to become a residential area for 10,000 inhabitants. The reconstruction plans have been further delayed due to, this time, legal disputes and negotiations that need to be settled first. As I said, often enough, lost places are lost places for a reason.